Hello everyone. In this video we're going over activity 10.3. So this one actually follows up from activity 10.2, so you may find it helpful to go back and read that first paragraph or so in activity 10.2. But very briefly, what we're looking at here is different study strategies and how they relate to performance on an exam. So our first variable we have in our data file is scores on an exam. In this case it's exam 2, we're looking at the scores. And then students were asked to report on how they studied for that exam. And there are 3 different scales that were used. One, they were asked about practice retrieval, and that's asking about how many times or how often did you use skills like testing yourself. So higher numbers indicate they did more of this. For spacing scale, it's how spread out were your study sessions. Were they all crammed together or were they more spread out? So more spread out is better, and higher numbers indicate greater spacing. And then finally we have the rereading scale, where this is asking people how often they reread the book, where higher numbers indicate more of this behavior. Now, previous research has shown that practice retrieval and spacing scale are important predictors of exam performance, but rereading the book isn't. And so what we're looking at here for our data is whether or not that is the case. So we're going to look at these scores, and they're all measured on an interval ratio scale, so we can go ahead and do a Pearson correlation. But before we do a Pearson correlation, we can first look at the scatter plots. To get the scatter plots, click on the Analyses menu, and then select Exploration, and then Scatter Plot. So we want to look at the relationship between each of these subscales and exam score. So I'm going to put exam score on the y-axis, and then I'm going to move practice retrieval over to the x-axis. So what we're looking for here is is there any weirdness in this pattern of data? Do we have problems? Does it look like it's not a linear relationship? Maybe it's a U-shape or an inverted U-shape, or maybe we have problems with heteroscedasticity, where we have more variability at one point in the scale than another. Right now, this looks okay, right? This looks like a linear relationships, and typically as practice retrieval goes up, exam scores seem to go up. We can do the same thing for the other variables by just moving the variable out from the x-axis and changing to the next variable. So we can also look at the spacing scale there, and then we can look at the rereading scale. Note that jamovi here is deleting the graph every time you make a new one. So you look at the graph, interpret, and then move on. Now to run the correlations, we're going to click on regression and click on correlation matrix. And then you can take all of the variables and move them over into this box, and it's going to compute a matrix of the correlations. So I'm going to ask for confidence intervals as well as the sample size for each of these. And all of our data are interval ratio, so I'm doing a Pearson correlation. So what I have here is a graph or grid or table of all of the correlations. This first column here shows me all of the variables and how they correlate with exam score. So this is looking at practice retrieval in exam 2. Pearson's R is 0.26 with a P of 0.007. And my 95% confidence intervals around that around that Pearson's R is that I'm 95% sure that the true R is somewhere between 0.07 and 0.44. Moving down to the spacing scale, I have a Pearson's R of 0.25 and a p-value of 0.00975, and my confidence interval there. Okay. So p-values are interpreted just like they are with any other statistic. Lower p-values indicate greater confidence that you're more sure that the results are not just due to sampling error, that the relationship you're observing is not just due to sampling error. So these two are quite low p-values. So, and you can tell they're both positive R's, which indicates that as scores on this studying technique go up, scores on the exam go up. So better practice retrieval, more practice retrieval is associated with higher exam scores, and more spacing is associated with higher exam scores there. Now if we look at the rereading scale, we have an R of only 0.02 with a p-value of 0.82, which tells me that difference or that relationship we're observing is probably just due to sampling error with a p-value of 0.82 there. Then I have my 95% confidence intervals listed there and my n as well. The other numbers in the table are looking at the different studying strategies correlated with each other. Right? This one right here is looking at the correlation between spacing scale and practice retrieval, and so forth. So that's actually all you need to run the analyses in jamovi. Right? There are some, you can also ask for plots if you are interested. You can get scatter plots down here by clicking on plots. They're just a little small to look at, but you can look at scatter plots this way or through that exploration menu. Either one's okay, and just whatever you're more comfortable looking at there. All right, well that should be all you need, and good luck with the activity.